What up, Dan and Amy? It's the Super Bowl day for politics, and we're going to discuss that. But also over the weekend, we had the release of the dash cam and body cam videos with respect to the police-involved shooting in Charlotte.
And also the wife's video that she took on her cell phone.
Correct. That was also provided NBC News, which was entered into the public domain for discussion as well. Here's Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Chief Kerr Putney discussing what the video offers and what it doesn't offer.
Here's the thing. Everybody goes back to the footage. The footage itself will not create in anyone's mind absolute certainty as to what this case represents and what the outcome should be. The footage only supports all of the other information, physical evidence, the statements from witnesses and officers, and all of the other information, scientific and physical, that create the entire picture. So the video footage is insufficient. I've been very clear.
Just remind us
and the video footage may be insufficient, but that doesn't mean that Chief Putney's position on what was recovered at the scene changed.
But again, there's another investigation ongoing. And yes, based on the totality of what we see, he absolutely was in possession of a handgun.
And the ABC affiliate in Charlotte, North Carolina, has an excellent source within the police department who said on that gun they found a fingerprint, his DNA, and also blood on the weapon. That was his weapon. A weapon that he shouldn't have had because he was a convicted felon.
Correct. Served 7 years in prison. To discuss this topic and the general state of the culture with respect to law enforcement and safety in our urban centers, as well as do a little preview of tonight's debate with us, we're happy to be joined by our friend. He is Colonel Allen West, of course, former Florida congressman, now the executive director and chairman of the board for the National Center for Policy Analysis in Texas. Colonel West, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Dan and Amy, it's always good to be with you. Good morning.
Morning. And so your reaction to the developments in Charlotte and what you understand to be the kind of facts as we know them, given the nature of the back and forth over racial politics, essentially?
Well, the first thing is I'm not a forensic examiner, and I'm not there to look at the evidence, but I will tell you my concern is that, it comes down to the rule of law versus mob rule. It comes down to whether or not we are going to allow the public domain to be the ones that are directing and guiding these investigations. We saw that happen in Ferguson. We saw that happen in Baltimore. We saw that happen in Milwaukee. It's very interesting that when the rule of law and the process and procedures work, as you saw in South Carolina with the police officer who shot the black man running away several times in the back, he's probably going to end up getting the needle down there because he was in the wrong. Just the same as the police officer in Tulsa has been charged with, I believe, manslaughter, first-degree manslaughter.
Right.
So we need to allow the people on the ground to have the opportunity to investigate and go through their processes and not have, it be dictated by media or, like I said, the mob rule. And what is very disconcerting for me is I think between 60 to 70% of the protesters that were arrested in North Carolina were not from Charlotte Mecklenburg, and some were not even from the state of North Carolina. And no one is talking about the protester that was shot, I think it was day 2, by another one of the protesters. So, this cherry picking what people want to talk about in the public domain really is more political than anything else. All lives do matter. And I don't know how many shootings occurred in Chicago this past weekend, but once again, we don't talk about those instances in the black community.
No, and the police shootings, I think, will be front and center in tonight's presidential debate. How do you think each candidate is going to handle that question and the issue at hand?
Well, I think you have to, once again, talk about, supporting our law enforcement, supporting the rule of law, and making sure that everyone is innocent until proven guilty. And when we continue to have people such as Hillary Clinton or others, and it's a very interesting hypocrisy. When it's a case of Islamic terrorism, we're told we can't rush to judgment, we can't be impetuous, but yet when there's something that involves the police, Clinton, who got out on the Steve Harvey radio show, immediately started talking about how she needed to go and lecture and talk to white people. I didn't know that the black community had elected Hillary Clinton as our ambassador.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's nice. I mean, it's nice. She's the white people whisperer, so it's very helpful for us to understand the world through her view. And the other thing that happens in these when these incidents occur is it's used as a jumping off point to prosecute all kinds of other grievances, right? So just case in point, this op-ed in the New York Times over the weekend by William Barber, who's a reverend down in Charlotte, and he's also the local head of the NAACP chapter there. And he writes in part, anyone who's concerned about violence in Charlotte should note that no one declared a state of emergency when the schools were resegregated, creating a school-to-prison pipeline for thousands of poor African-American children. Few voiced outrage over the damage caused when 500,000 North Carolinians were denied health insurance because the legislature refused to expand Medicaid, and so on and so on. And I mean, I guess it's just it's interesting to me on two fronts. One is that you use a police shooting. Now, you're no longer interested in talking about that. Now you want to talk about all these other kind of public policy challenges with respect to our urban centers. And then, of course, the other thing is that the policies, the impact of the policies that you're decrying were all policies supported by the NAACP.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And Reverend Barber, as we well know, is an individual who made some very disparaging remarks about Senator Tim Scott. And also, when you look at North Carolina, it's a battleground state. And so I think that's why you have a lot of this attention there. You know, these urban centers have been run by Democrat, liberal, progressive policy. It's very interesting that this reverend does not want to talk about, you know, school choice, school vouchers, charter schools. Barack Obama was the first black president who also canceled the D.C. school voucher program while he sends his kids to the exclusive Sidwell Friends.
Yep.
And then as far as Medicaid expansion, we should be seeking to get people off of Medicaid, because what that means is that we're just expanding the poverty roll. So I think that the people in North Carolina, instead of being on the hook with more unfunded mandates and liabilities that come down from the federal government, which is really what will end up happening with the expansion of Medicaid, they should be looking at economic opportunities and building the economic growth within that state of North Carolina and all across the United States of America, so that we can get people off the poverty rolls, which we have, of course, seen expanded, as well as food stamp rolls under the presidency of Barack Obama.
We're talking to Colonel Allen West. Now, for those of you who didn't know, the executive director and chairman of the board for the National Center for Policy Analysis in Texas.
And he's also going to be our keynote speaker at our Freedom Summit Chicago.
Of course he is. And we're going to be happy to have him. That's
Yes.
October 29th.
Yes,
Looking forward to it.
Yeah,
Month away.
freedomsummitchicago.com to buy your tickets. But
Let me just ask you another question, Colonel West, per your expertise. If you were Donald Trump, how would you tackle national security related issues, particularly homeland security, against the backdrop of the Chelsea bomber, the stabbing in St. Cloud, what may be a terrorist attack in Burlington, Washington over the weekend? What we have another shooting today in southwestern Houston where a suspect has now been shot after opening fire. Police saying as many as 7 injured. How would you tackle the homeland security part of the national security discussion?
Well, I would, just take a look at what has happened across the ocean in Germany, where they did not, Angela Merkel did not respect the sovereignty of Germany, opened borders, and allowed, all of these refugees to come in without proper vetting. And look at what she's dealing with. And when you talk about what happened in St. Cloud, Minnesota, I think about the Somali refugee resettlement program that has spawned, this terrorist sanctuary that we have up there. And you look at the policies of the President of the United States of America when we have these, horrific terrorist attacks such as San Bernardino, such as Orlando, Fort Hood, and it's always obfuscation. It's always denial. It's always lying. It's always about the ideological agenda of gun control. Or when we look overseas with, the complete withdrawal of our forces from Iraq, what have been the second and third order ramifications and effects of that? We created a vacuum. That vacuum was filled by a horrific terrorist enemy, a savage and barbaric entity called ISIS. And then as well, mishandling global affairs, foreign policy relations. We're strengthening Iran. We have emboldened and empowered Russia. You see a China that is resurgent across the Pacific, and then you see a North Korea with their abject belligerence whatsoever. And I think that it's very important that you tie that back to the person who was Barack Obama's first Secretary of State, her reset button, her destabilization of Libya, the fact that she would not even declare a terrorist organization like Boko Haram a terrorist organization or the Muslim Brotherhood. So I think it's going to be very hard for Hillary Clinton to try to distance herself from these domestic and foreign policy and national security failures.
I think we should have a tag team, and Donald Trump should be able to tag you in at any point during the debate.
Like Mr. Wrestling #1 and
Yeah, exactly.
#2 back in the day.
Yeah, right.
You could be in the
Absolutely.
corner.
You could wear tights and an outfit and the whole thing. It'd be
I
fun.
don't think we want to see Donald Trump in tights. He's a little overweight.
All right, he is Colonel Alan West. Again, he's the executive director and chairman of the board of the National Center for Policy Analysis, and he's going to be our guest in Chicago in the not too distant future before the election.
Yes, he will be in Chicago for Freedom Summit, which is coming back to Chicago on Saturday, October 29th, happening at the Chicago Westin, Northwest, and Itasca. And to get tickets to see Colonel Alan West and others, go to freedomsummitchicago.com. We'll see you October 29th.
Thanks for joining us,
Looking
Colonel
forward.
West. Thank you.
Thanks
Appreciate
so
it.
much, Dan and Amy. Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.